You know how history sometimes gets presented like this super neat, tidy timeline? Yeah, well, the real story is almost never that simple. Today, we're going to pull on just one thread from a 2,000-year-old story, the origin of Christianity, and you'll see how the whole tapestry just completely changes when we look a little closer at the real evidence. So let's dive in.
Okay, so our investigation kicks off with this. This one single object, it's a reliquary in Rome. And inside, there's a piece of wood. Now, this isn't just any piece of wood. The claim is that it's a fragment of the sign that was placed on the cross of Jesus. The legend says it was found way back in the 4th century by Empress Helena, the mother of the famous Emperor Constantine. She supposedly went to Jerusalem and, through a miracle, dug up the true cross. Think about that. This story creates a direct physical line connecting the height of Roman power all the way back to the very start of Christianity. And that legend, that incredible story, brings us right to the heart of the matter. It's the big question we're asking today. When you're looking at the birth of a world religion, how in the world do you separate a story driven by faith from what we can prove as historical fact? And listen, this isn't about belief. It's not a theological question. It's a question of evidence.
All right, so let's put on our detective hats, shall we? We're going to start with Empress Helena. I mean, her big trip to Jerusalem is the whole foundation of this true cross legend. But, and this is a big but, when you actually start digging into the historical record, some pretty major problems start to pop up. Okay, just take a look at this timeline. The crucifixion, we're talking around the year 30. Helena's pilgrimage, that doesn't happen for almost 300 years, around 326. And get this, the first time anyone even writes about her finding the cross, that's not until around the year 402. For a historian, that gap, nearly 300 years between the event and the first time anyone mentions its discovery, that's not just a red flag, that's a giant waving neon red flag. And the legend itself, oh, it's super dramatic. The story goes that Helena unearths 3 crosses, right? So how do you know which one is the right one? Well, they bring a sick person forward, and boom, they're healed by touching the correct one. It's an incredibly powerful story, for sure. But the proof is a miracle, not, historical documentation. And this right here, this is the real kicker for historians. There was a guy named Eusebius of Caesarea. He was a bishop and a historian, and he was living in Palestine at the exact same time Helena was visiting. He wrote all about her trip, the churches she built, everything. And yet, he never, not once, mentions her finding the cross. That silence, it's absolutely deafening. And it's pretty much the main reason why most scholars today think the story was made up later. So, okay, if the story isn't literal history, what is it? What does it tell us? Well, it's a powerful look into something very human, that desire to make faith tangible, right? To hold a piece of something sacred. Helena's quest, whether it really happened or not, becomes this powerful symbol for the 4th century church, this huge, powerful institution needing to physically connect back to its super humble beginnings. And this idea, this need for a tangible connection, it fits so perfectly into that simple, straight-line story of Christianity's origins that a lot of us have heard. You know the one I'm talking about, a straight line from Jesus to the massive global religion we see today. Yeah, and this quote from the Cambridge History of Christianity just nails it. It sums up that traditional story perfectly. It even frames it like a fairy tale, doesn't it? A pristine faith received directly from Jesus and then passed down totally unchanged. So this traditional story, it basically unfolds in 3 simple acts. Act 1, you've got this pristine faith, right? A single perfect message passed from Jesus to his disciples. Then, Act 2, heresies emerge. These are framed as just distortions, corruptions of that original truth. And finally, Act 3, triumph. The one true faith beats all the odds, and the big finale is the conversion of the Roman Emperor Constantine. It's clean, it's straightforward, and yeah, it's a really powerful story. But what if that simple story isn't the whole story? What if the stuff modern historians and archaeologists are digging up paints a picture that is way more complex and, honestly, a whole lot more interesting? And that question brings us right to the core of what modern scholars are saying, which is this. Early Christianity wasn't one single pristine faith. Nope. Instead, right from the very beginning, there were many different Christianities, all bubbling up at the same time. And look, this isn't just some wild guess. It's based on an absolute explosion of evidence that's been discovered over the last century or so. We're talking about incredible chance finds, things like the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt. These finds gave us texts that were lost for 1,500 years. It's like opening a window into a whole world of early Christian thought that we literally had no idea existed before. Just look at this map for a second. It really shows you why that diversity was basically inevitable. I mean, there was no central headquarters, no Vatican City sending out memos. Instead, Christianity just grew organically in all these scattered communities, spreading across the huge Roman Empire, from Syria to Egypt, Greece to Gaul. And of course, each community is going to interpret this new faith through its own local culture, its own lens. And you can see this diversity right from day one. The first huge debate, the first major split, was between what we call Jewish Christians. They believed that to follow Jesus, you also had to follow Jewish law, and Gentile Christians. And their big champion was the Apostle Paul, who argued that no, non-Jews could join the movement without having to convert to Judaism first. So the really crucial takeaway here is that the early Christian world wasn't some calm, peaceful lake of unity that just got a few ripples from heresy now and then. No way. It was more like a roiling, boiling ocean of debate. Diversity and disagreement weren't bugs in the system. They were a core feature of the whole origin story. Okay, so this begs a pretty obvious question, right? If there were so many different Christianities, how did we ever get to one single Christian identity? Well, the answer is, it wasn't just handed down from on high. It was actively forged, hammered out over centuries of debate. And this identity was being built on a bunch of different fronts all at the same time. You had Christians developing their own unique literary culture with letters and gospels. They had to figure out who they were in relation to their parent religion, Judaism, and also to the much larger Greco-Roman world around them. And maybe most importantly, all these competing Christian groups were debating each other like crazy, trying to figure out what would eventually become the mainstream belief. So in short, Christian identity wasn't some perfect package received from the sky. It was hammered out in the messy, complicated, totally human process of arguing and writing and trying to define what it even meant to be a follower of Jesus. And that whole process, this forging of a single identity, it brings us right back to where we started, back to Emperor Constantine. See, in the simple story, his conversion is the big, happy ending. But when you look at it through this new lens, this lens of diversity, his role suddenly looks very, very different. Check out this quote. It reveals a huge political motivation. I mean, Constantine was an emperor. And what do emperors need? A unified empire. A single, unified church would be an incredibly powerful tool for social cohesion, for holding everything together. So the push for one orthodox Christianity, it wasn't just about theology. It was about imperial policy. So the age of Constantine, it wasn't really the victory of some single faith that had always been there. It was the moment that raw imperial power stepped into the ring and started to consolidate one version of Christianity from all those competing groups. It was the meeting point, the convergence of a religious movement and political power, and it's what transformed a diverse, scattered faith into a centralized institution. You know, what we've really been doing here is something called historical revisionism. And that term can sound a little scary, but it doesn't mean changing the past to fit what we want. It just means we're constantly updating our understanding of the past as new evidence comes to light. It's really just the process of trying to get this story as right as we possibly can.
Which leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If that neat, tidy story of a single, unified origin isn't really historically accurate, if Christianity's deepest roots are actually found in this dynamic, messy, incredible diversity, what does that mean for how we understand its entire 2,000-year history and even what it is today? Yeah, that's something to think about.